Yeah. Well, that is, I think, probably our best That is a very good question. We are currently in the process of learning things, and those can be required for programming. So I assume you know my current so he'll be in touch with details, but the big issue now is food usage. So, but we will be, I hope, so yeah, this is all of our programming. I say all of our programs basically are kind of just waiting for that. So your patience is very much appreciated. There's a lot of good moving parts here, so it's just trying to figure out everything, make sure we have the right things in place so that when things go, they No, it's that is another element to this. The other thing is that like things are going up. Actually, I'm going to go crazy. Who are now? This is totally preventable. I mean, that's a horrible medical situation.
Well, this and that
Very tough. I actually read a book. Yeah, it was covered. But all that is to say, we're also in love with the Bible.
yeah.
That's sort of what and also that's the thing, new technology. Like
Well, good morning. Welcome to our worship in the parking lot this morning. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, however you identify, whomever you love, and in whatever way you worship, you are welcome here at UUCC. This summer, we are exploring the dimensions of our own spiritual imaginations with a worship series focusing on the different ways we think about God. We spent last week supposing God was one. It's only fitting that we shift this week by supposing that God is many. One of the extraordinary resources of Unitarian Universalism is the diversity of spiritual points of view represented in our congregations. Similarly, various religious heritages have come together to provide the foundations for UU spirituality. In short, diverse ideas about God and our spiritual selves are part of who we are. So as we go forward with this series, I invite all of us to adopt the posture of improv comedians. The rule for improv is that you always respond with yes and. And I say that because I don't think we always realize how groundbreaking and extraordinary it is that we as UUs get to do that around questions of belief. Religion has existed in human culture for millennia on the premise of exclusion. Part of how we are evolving those traditions is that we can say yes and when it comes to these foundational questions. And so I call us into worship this morning. I'm so glad that you are here to imagine, to consider, and to suppose together as we all confront the great mystery as a beloved community.
The words for this morning's chalice lighting are by Cheryl Block. In this sacred space, let us be still in the quiet. In this sacred space, let our hearts open as a butterfly's wings. In this sacred space, may the glow of this light shine within us. Joys and concerns is the time in our service when we pause to reflect on our week. We recall the milestones, the joys, concerns, and sorrows, and changes in our lives, those who need our healing thoughts. Community is deepened, standing in witness to what is in our hearts. Would you please speak aloud the names of people that you would like to be held in this moment? Please feel free to come forward during the centering music and add a stone to our water bowl for a silent joy or concern. I will add one more stone for the silent joys and concerns held in the quiet places of our hearts. Before we welcome one another, please be conscious of the colors on people's name tags. Green means it's okay to approach. Yellow means okay to approach with reservations. Red means please maintain your social distance. And if you're not sure, please ask. Now let's welcome one another.
Searchers and those on deep journey, like our time, we seek out the Spirit's presence in the endless
Hi, I'm Kat White. Taking the adult Credo course is maybe the most UU thing that I have ever done. A small group of adults came together on Sunday mornings for several months, talking about experiences, life experiences, and their meanings, looking for understanding, not answers. Melissa and David were awesome and led this in a really meaningful way. The only thing that I am jealous of, for those of you who take this in the future, is that you guys will get to be in person and we were on Zoom. So here's my credo. My name is Kat White, and I've been a member of UUCC since 2008, when my husband, John Bacon, and I joined First U after we moved to Shaker Heights from the west side, where we were members of West Shore. I don't remember my family ever talking about religion while I was growing up, even when we went to church, which was mostly with relatives. My only formal religious education was a few sessions of Sunday school when I was 5, and the colorful crafts made the biggest impression on me. When I was 7, we moved to North Canton and occasionally went to the Methodist church for Christmas, Easter, or when my sister sang in the choir. But we never talked about what it meant to go to church or be Christian. We celebrated Christmas with a tree and manger, and Easter with eggs and a basket of candy. My dad died without my ever having a conversation with him about his religious beliefs. My mother does not want to discuss her beliefs because, I think, she still feels her family's Pentecostal judgment. One of my major influences in my family is my Uncle Jack, who is a 93-year-old Jesuit and historian. Eventually, I started exploring religion on my own. I attended the high school Christian youth group Young Life, which tried to instill moral decision-making in an atmosphere rife with hormones. After I started college as a walk-on to the Kent Stark branch, I discovered the best coffee and conversation on campus was in the ecumenical campus ministry office. Under the influence of a college boyfriend and the liberal outlook of the Kent State Newman Center, I briefly became Catholic in 1988. I joined the Kent UU Church in 1997 and knew I'd found my true spiritual home. The 7 principles spoke to me immediately. Because I was not indoctrinated in a faith as I grew up, I approached religion as a subject of study, like history or science, and felt free to question, accept, and reject beliefs and practices. I am okay with mystery, contradiction, and the unknown. I am one mere human in the universe at this point in time, and I'm okay with that. I believe that humans invented religion to make sense of their lives and world, and that humans and our beliefs evolve. Many humans use religion for good, but some use it for power and profit. I do not believe that a person needs to be religious or subscribe to a particular creed to behave morally and ethically. Jesus may have died for our sins, but so did Gandhi and Martin Luther King and millions of others. I believe that humans are responsible for our difficulties and the solutions to those problems, not divine intervention. We have to work to create the world we want to live in, and my being a UU is a reflection and supports that view. I find our practices of communally breaking bread, scooping soup, pouring coffee, and digging in the dirt to be especially meaningful. The word worship bugs me to refer to our Sunday services, since we don't agree on who or what or whether we actually worship anything. I am not sure if there are divine beings, but I really hope we are not the most intelligent things in the universe. I am as likely to find meaning in pop culture or fiction as I am in religious or philosophical texts. May the force be with you, and live long and prosper are as meaningful and valid as namaste and the Lord be with you. I'm planning on living to be 100 plus because according to Star Trek lore, first contact takes place on my 100th birthday. And that seems like as good of a reason as any for sticking around. I do not know what happens after we die, but I hope there is reincarnation or some sort of ongoing connection and energy that our essences feed into and draw from. I believe that all humans are a mix of good and bad, although some really seem to tip the scales in either direction, and that argues in my mind for some sort of cosmic balance. I've loved the very UU nature of the Credo course that combined a recognizable structure and shared exploration. This is as close as I've ever gotten to setting down my actual beliefs. It's still hard for me to say, I believe. I tend to fall back on, I hope this to be true. And I always recognize that being human, I could always be wrong.
So take a moment, quiet your mind, and open your heart. In ancient times, people respected and were awed by the great forces of nature. They celebrated the cycles of the seasons as they related to the world around them. Cycles of agriculture, plowing, growth, harvest, and fallow time. Cycles of their lives, birth, growth, and death. They saw divinity in the sun, the moon, the earth, in all life. The creative energies of the universe were personified. Masculine and feminine principles became gods and goddesses. The Lord of the dance, the mother of all life. These were not semi-abstract superhuman figures set apart from nature. They were embodied in earth and sky, women and men, plants and animals. Take a moment, quiet your mind, open your heart. Where do you find the sacred? Where does divinity catch your eye? Please take a moment to reflect. Our collection today will benefit the Unitarian Universalist Justice Ohio organization, also known as UUJO. UUJO is a 501c3 organization that serves the 38 UU congregations and fellowships across Ohio. Their mission is to offer education, advocacy, and action consistent with Unitarian Universalist liberal religious principles, and to witness with and on behalf of marginalized groups and individuals. Please give as you are willing and within your means. And you can also donate via the Cash App. The information is in the order of service.
Just a few years ago, we received a new translation of Homer's Odyssey. There's about 1 billion translations of Homer's Odyssey, but it took until 2017 before one appeared that had been done by a female translator. Emily Wilson's translation is an extraordinary re-attention to a very old text. Indicative of that, in her translator's note, she shared these words. There is a stranger outside your home. He is old, ragged, and dirty. He's tired. He's been wandering, homeless, for a long time, perhaps many years. Invite him inside. You do not know his name. He may be a thief. He may be a murderer. He may be a god. He may remind you of your husband, your father, or yourself. Do not ask questions. Wait. Let him sit in a comfortable chair and warm himself beside your fire. Bring him some food, the best that you have, and a cup of wine. Let him eat and drink until he is satisfied. Be patient. When he is finished, he will tell you his story. Listen carefully. It may not be as you expect. I have a friend who was kind enough, in a moment of real, intimate, personal sharing, to own up to one of those embarrassing private things that maybe many of us can relate to and identify with, but is very hard to share in mixed company. I love that this friend told me this story because it made me both care for her more, and it made me realize and feel better about my own embarrassing moments that fortunately no one has seen. So my friend explained that there was just a night. She wanted to order some pizza. She was having difficulty deciding what to order. She didn't really know what she wanted that particular night. So flipping through, as we all do, our stack of takeout menus, she was sifting through coupons, and she found something that was perfect, except it was like a meal deal for like a whole family. And she lived alone. But no big deal, right? You know, you just order, have a bunch of leftovers. No problem, pizza heats up just fine. But she didn't think about the fact that someone was going to deliver this pizza to her door. So when the delivery person showed up, she was so flustered and embarrassed about the huge amount of food that she ordered that she yelled back into her empty apartment and said, "Hey guys, the pizza's here." She paid the guy, and the delivery person left, and she had her pizza alone for herself, with all of the comfort granted to her by telling a little white lie. And I feel honored that she shared this story. It's so courageous, but also so generous to remind us that we all do weird things when we're alone. But my friend's story also kind of made me realize something about hospitality and how my day-to-day life relates to strangers whom I don't know, and just how bizarre most of our relationships are to our doorbells and our front doors. I'm sure I'm not the only one here, but especially during COVID, I was ordering way more takeout food than usual. So weirdly, people were coming to my door all the time. When I was feeling put together, of course, I would come to the door, greet the delivery person, I would thank them, take the food, you know, social, hospitable. But other times, maybe most of the time, when I was feeling like a troll person who didn't want to have to get out from under my bridge, I would click that little menu item that said, "Leave by the front door." And because of social media and cell phones and modern cultures of communication, the people who come to my door these days and knock are basically only people who are there to drop off something or to leave something for me. Now, the thing is, that is completely ordinary for us. That is normal. Deliveries, the mail system, that is a very ordinary part of our world. But in the scope of human culture, this state of affairs is both bizarre and I'm sure for every one of our ancestors would seem cruel. Because hospitality is the basis for human culture. To welcome a stranger in need into your home with hospitality is a deep and profound part of our moral framework. When someone comes to your door, you're supposed to invite them in and serve their needs, not invite someone to your door only to serve your own. More than just human culture, this is also a near universal religious value, at least in part, because of stories like the one that we're about to turn to. So consider a different story. This one is much older, and it takes place in the ancient world. An old woman has appeared in a village, settling by the well in its central square. She is the very picture of a child's nursemaid, but she has no children. A group of women arrive to gather water, and they greet the old woman kindly, who explains that she had been a captive of pirates, but has escaped. She wandered for weeks until she found this village. So the women invite her back to their home. They are the daughters of the king, and they insist that their family is kind and honorable. Their mother is especially kind, they say, and despite her age, she has given birth to a son who needs to be nursed and nurtured. They bring the strange woman back to their home, and this woman becomes an expert caretaker. And the child she nurses grows and flourishes beyond a normal pace for a child of that age. The boy's mother, who has been said to be so kind, becomes jealous and very suspicious. One night, she spies on the old woman, and she sees a radiant figure, as if made from light, caring for the child. She cries out in fear and begs for her child back and yells at the stranger to leave. The stranger turns, hands the child back to his mother, and casts off the guise of the old woman, showing her truest form. For this is the goddess Demeter, and she had come to the world of humans because her daughter Persephone had just been stolen away from her by Hades, the god of death. And in her deep grief, this chance to care for a child was a grace that she had been very thankful for. But the mother, in all of her inhospitality, had shown her fear and her unfriendliness. And she had now ensured that her own child would not have the gifts that would come from having a goddess be your nursemaid. And what is more, Demeter would now spend her time in grief away from the earth, leaving us with the passing autumn and the fallow winter. With the gods, hospitality matters. It answers a whole set of questions about who you are. Do you welcome the stranger, or do you cast them out for fear and self-protection? This story is a real part of ancient religious thinking. It actually comes to us attached to the works of Homer, who wrote the Odyssey. But the idea is a profound one that's shared across ancient cultures. Before modernity, the world was full of gods. In the experience of essentially everyone before the dawn of science, the powers that these were mythologies in which the natural gods were stand-ins for sort of the power of nature. Of course, those natural forces like the ocean or the winds were represented by gods, but all of the forces of the world were represented. And that meant that there were gods of love and sex, there were gods of violence and grief, there were gods of fate and fortune, of communication, of music, of drama. Families had gods, but so did cities. Ethnic peoples were frequently involved and were separated and categorized as people because of the god they worshipped. They were also built into the most intimate parts of life. In Rome, one of the most important goddesses was Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, because that place was the heart of the home, and she was there to ensure that homes were warm and safe. In ancient China, by contrast, the Menshin were gods who ruled over doors and thresholds, protecting those who were inside. Thanks very much to pointers given to me by our worship associate, Peggy Ligodny, shared this week, I've been learning how these pagan and polytheistic traditions were brought into the UU imagination, and they were part of the earth-centered spirituality and ecofeminism movements of the late 1970s. Seeing resources in the religions of the pre-modern world is certainly about making ways for religious experience that are not tied to the faith traditions that dominate the Western world. And those UUs who have worked hard to gain understanding and legitimacy for these traditions have done so to bring all of us new ways of thinking about our own spiritual experience. But these traditions also put a check on modern assumptions that the world and our experiences are best understood through exclusively rationalistic thinking. A world full of gods, in other words, is a way of understanding how power is manifested and shaped by the world. This is why the idea of a god correlating with a piece of nature is only the beginning of the understanding. These gods are not just anthropomorphic stand-ins. They're like a language for seeing the unseeable dimensions of the world and manifesting them in terms of the agency of people whose situation and motives we most understand. So also, unlike the monotheistic gods we met last week, these gods are not only good or bad. Some of them are whimsical and capricious. Some are capable of changing their minds. They're not necessarily supremely powerful. Some are characterized precisely by being inconsistent and changeable. At one level, these gods don't all admit of belief or worship in the way that we traditionally think of those terms. For many of them, honoring the gods is about how you act in the world, by being brave, caring for the sick, providing for your family. That may be what supposing many gods can mean to a spirituality in 2021, a way of seeing the sacred in our world, in strangers and neighbors, and in ourselves. I'm reminded of the words of David Foster Wallace from his celebrated commencement address to Kenyon College. He wrote, "In the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. and the compelling reason for maybe choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship, be it JC or Allah, be it Yahweh or the Wiccan Mother Goddess or the Four Noble Truths or some inviolable set of ethical principles, is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, if they're where you tap real meaning in life, then you will never have enough, never feel you have enough. Worship your body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die a million deaths before they finally grieve you. On one level, we all know this stuff already. It's been codified as myths, proverbs, cliches, epigrams, parables, the skeleton of every great story. The whole trick is keeping the truth up in front in daily consciousness. I've always appreciated Foster Wallace's words here, and I think he has a real point about real meaning. Because we all do struggle with making meaning, and there's no such thing as not worshiping in a world where so many people are consumed by the desire for power and money and beauty and celebrity. So the personal point is important enough. But the other side of Wallace's words is that our worship is also how we bring sacredness into the world, because we interface with a world of gods and miracles and fate and purpose. Some sort of God or spiritual type thing can be world-changing when it invites those gods into our experience and turns a natural landscape into something holy, or reshapes the way that we come to know one another by attending to our divine dimensions and the things that are powerful and profound in each of us. A few weeks ago, I had to do that thing that is so annoying and unfun. It is a legitimately defunct premise for stand-up comedians or late-night hosts. I had to get my driver's license renewed at the DMV. I cannot imagine a place that is less sacred. This is not a place where gods lurk. This is not a space where holiness resonates. There is no sacred presence at the DMV, at least not one that jumps out at you when you're sitting in a poorly air-conditioned room under flickering fluorescent lights. And I felt all of that while I was there. But perhaps it's actually my lack of imagination that missed the sacredness that was around me, the hospitality of the workers, the needs of the supplicants who came with their questions and their requests, the offer and receiving of identity and personhood. These are certainly not the traditional gods, and this is not a traditional temple. But perhaps the DMV is a place where gods confront us with what Wallace describes to be, quote, not only meaningful, but sacred, on fire with the same force that made the stars, love, fellowship, the mystical oneness of all of things deep down. Supposing the God is many, and you may find that you have already been received with the hospitality of those who've gone before you, gods who have prepared the way for you to explore the wilderness, to make your way in cities, to hold yourself in silence, or to experience meaning through speech and song. Suppose that God is many, and you may find that you can participate in this divine life by fostering the same kind of hospitality that's been offered to you. Because they've already been here alongside us, because they invited us in before we even arrived. Opening our doors to strangers becomes easier when we realize that the door was first opened to us. And through our efforts, we may one day look carefully at ourselves and discover that we have become gods, just in time to shed our mortality and join the diverse divine company beyond. Suppose that God is many, and you can refract your experience of the world through the lens of the sacred. It's a way of seeing holiness in the complexity and grandeur without losing sight of the very real world around us. And that's important, because in weeks to come, of course, we will find many ways to think about God that invite us into mysticism and abstraction. And we can chase God through mystery and silence and darkness. But these gods, the many gods, are much closer, much more imminent than the gods who are more abstract. These are the gods who we meet on the street, the ones who beg us for money, the ones who bring magic into old forests and pulse the ocean with power, the gods we sit next to in traffic and who greet you at the DMV. These gods bring sacredness with them into the world. They allow us to find gods all around us and to swarm our world with divinity. Consider one more story, your own story. Here you all sit, content in the awareness of your own selves, your own individuality, and your own isolated existence. You have met no fates or furies, and you haven't discovered any destiny or prophecy that rules over your life. Your life is the stuff that you can see and feel and measure, and it is entirely in your hands. But then you hear a sharp, confident knock on the door. Your instinct is to stay silent, to wait for the stranger to go away. After all, you're content the way you are, right? Aren't you? You hear another sharp knock. They aren't going away. Should you answer? Dare you answer? We extinguish our chalice and close today with words from Annie Dillard's extraordinary book, Holy the Firm. Every day is a God. Each day is a God, and holiness holds forth in time. I worship each God. I praise each day splintered down and wrapped in time like a husk of many colors spreading, at dawn fast over the mountain split. Amen.